There are so many people who are in Italy who are also caught up in this, including many Canadians. And we're going to meet one now who's in a really particular situation. She is studying international law. She's part of an international program that the UN runs. About 50 students in Turin, there we were looking at, studying international law. And there she is, Miranda Galle, supposed to be there for 7 months, and she just arrived in Italy. Miranda landing right in the middle of this huge global story. Good morning and welcome to our program.
Hi, Heather. Thanks so much for having me.
Well, I'm really interested in your story. How is the lockdown affecting you so far, Miranda?
Well, it's been really frustrating. Obviously, classes have been canceled. There's a lot of misunderstanding of what's legal and what's not legal in terms of going around the city or traveling at all. It seems impossible. But for me personally, I've been actually forced to self-quarantine for 2 weeks as one of my classmates actually tested positive for corona. So that means staying in my house and not even getting to go to the supermarket or the restaurants during the day.
So you're locked down within a lockdown. One of your fellow international students tested positive.
Yes, exactly. She was on the way back to her home country when they canceled courses. A lot of people left. They realized this was going to be about a 5 or 6 week period. So a lot of people actually went back to their home countries, which is concerning now that we know that a classmate did test positive because they might have been bringing that virus home, but that's the situation.
Well, bringing the virus home or perhaps infecting you, fellow students. I mean, how is your health, Miranda? Are you feeling okay?
Yeah, I'm personally feeling okay. I was quite sick with flu symptoms a couple of weeks ago. But now I'm doing a lot better. But I mean, that's another thing I've mentioned to some people is it's frustrating, just the system overload, the medical system overload. We actually don't have access to corona tests. So I wasn't even able to see like a couple of weeks ago if I had, like maybe I had the virus, maybe I didn't, but there's no way to know without actually having taken the test.
You weren't able to get tested, so you do not know.
No, that's it. They're only really testing people who are high priority, so who come in with like a huge fever that's off the charts and who can't breathe. They're getting tested, but it's very hard for sort of people with average flu symptoms to get tested, and we're put into self-quarantine. But I feel that it's very important to test because we need the data, right? Like
Yes.
The death rate, it looks much worse. I mean, not to say it's not a bad situation, but it's definitely inflated if we don't have an accurate idea of the real numbers on the ground and who has the virus.
Well, indeed. So are you okay? I mean, if you are suddenly having to self-isolate 2 weeks, are you okay for food? Did you have enough supplies before it began if you're not even allowed to go out and get food at the supermarket, etc.?
I mean, I stocked up. I got a lot, as much as I can. Mm-hmm. It is what it is, and if it gets really dire, I may talk to some roommates or some people that maybe didn't have direct exposure and see if they can bring me some supplies, but for now it's okay.
You have roommates there in your place too? Are they also having to self-isolate because of you?
They haven't, technically. Oh, well, it's sort of a national debate. Well, it's not really a national debate. The national discourse has been echoing the words of the government, which is io resto a casa, which is like I'm staying at home.
Right.
So a lot of people are choosing to self-quarantine whether or not they have symptoms or not, just for the sake of the country. Mm-hmm. So a lot of them are, but there's basic things like some people are still going to work, some people still need to go to the store, things like that. But generally speaking, most people are self-quarantining on their own will.
We're seeing a few people in that square, the piazza I was showing live, but very, very few. Life pretty much coming to a halt in Turin. You've been, I know, as we look at that live picture, in touch with Canadian officials. I'm going to pull up an email that you've sent out. Current Canadian student in Torino, there's their subject line. I've been trying to call the consulate, but unable to get through. I wanted to get in touch because you're studying, and I would like to leave the country. However, I want to find out what the implications are for returning to Italy. So tell me what has happened as you've tried to get information from Canadian officials, Miranda.
Sure. So I would like to mention, too, that obviously now that I've potentially been contaminated, I'm self-quarantining, but this email was sent before I knew that.
Yes.
I was thinking about leaving and coming back when school reopens. So I called the consulate in Milan. I called the embassy in Rome. You know, you call and it's the typical press 1, press 2, press this. At no point was I able to get through to anyone. So I sent an email thinking that I would be able to get some answers, and instead I got this generic template email.
We'll show that on the screen as you talk about it. You sent that to us as well, sort of standard form response.
Exactly, and that wasn't even, it was an exact replica of an email they had finally sent out earlier that morning, just to all Canadian residents generally, that are registered as being in Italy abroad. So it was absolute, for me, it's like, I mean, I'm okay, I guess, because, I mean, I'm better off maybe than, let's say, a 19-year-old studying for the first time abroad that doesn't know what's going on. I don't know. I'm dealing with the situation, and I speak some Italian, so I can read local news sources. But I just keep thinking about, like, what happens to the young person that's in Canada or that's Canadian studying abroad that doesn't understand local media? That email doesn't explain anything. It doesn't say what the laws are. There's a lot of confusion. It doesn't specify like what you can and can't do. Like I'm in an international program, so I've got international students that we're all exchanging information from our respective embassies, that the information that we're given, but it's not enough. Like it's not acceptable that I have to get information from my friend who's contacting the Mexican or Filipino embassy.
I was going to ask, how does the information that you got by contacting Canadian officials, how does it compare to what your fellow students are getting from their respective governments?
It doesn't. I mean, to be honest, it's very pathetic and it's disappointing. There's a lot of stress, a lot of confusion. Like, talk about being arrested if you get on a train to somewhere because we're on lockdown. Like that's not a simple thing, Like, this is serious. And I'm getting no response. I called Global Affairs Hotline finally, because they have a 24/7 hotline. And the kind lady was really able to help me out with some basic stuff, like I have the right as a foreign national to leave, things like that. But she wasn't able to help me with my unique situation because she doesn't work at the embassy,
Yes.
So
what would help you most right now, do you think? Because these are sort of uncharted waters and territory for governments to deal with this.
Yeah, I think I would just like to be able to have even a 5-minute phone call with somebody who works at the consulate or the embassy in Rome or Milan, just knowing what the implications are going to be, knowing, like, for example, if I were to leave at some point after the quarantine, if I were to leave and try and come back to continue my studies, if the area is still a red zone, will I be able to get back in, or will I have a financial burden of supporting myself wherever I end up in Europe, kind of stranded until I can come back? Like, that was my big question. Like, I would just like to have that phone conversation with somebody who knows the situation. Like when I call Global Affairs Hotline, they don't necessarily know the unique
individual circumstances. Yes.
Exactly.
Well, we'll hope that you're able to get that information. I don't know if your family in Chilliwack, BC, are up super early to see you. I hope they are, and they'll be happy to see you so well, and knowing that you're following the quarantine rules to the letter of the law. But I am wondering, as I talk to you, I see your smile, and that's just wonderful going through this circumstance in Italy. But as the situation worsens and as the numbers go up, even though you're staying there in your apartment, I'm just wondering how worried you are about the situation there and about the possibility of becoming ill even.
Like, I'm definitely worried. I think people would be lying if they say they're not worried, But I also don't want to feed into the hysteria. Like, I have my friend and my classmate who did contract corona, and I know it's different depending on your circumstances, your age, things like that, but she's getting through it. A lot of us have been sick. I've seen other people with it. Like, we're getting through it. I think it'll be okay. I know if I do contract it, it's not the end of the world. But I'm more nervous, just the uncertainty, the lack of communication with the Canadian government, and what the implications will be long term if this doesn't end in a month. It's quarantined for a month, but what happens if it's quarantined for 2 months? What if they cancel all public transit even within Torino? Like this.
Yes.
This is what worries me. I don't want to be in my home alone. It's psychologically draining for like a month. That would be a lot.
Absolutely. Understandably. Major implications for you. We're going to stay in touch to make sure you're okay and to follow up. You stay well. And Miranda, thank you for this conversation and for sharing your story. We'll be back to you and following along with you there. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much, Heather. Take care.
That's Miranda Galle, who's in Turin, Italy, under quarantine.